Dang, all of the Thomas movies have either ranged from actually pretty good to literal trash.
I'm still not letting you out, by the way.
If only there could be a Thomas movie that could be better than all of these movies combined. If only there was a Thomas movie that could outshine the entire competition. Hey, what's this? The Adventure Begins, huh? Well, it at least sounds promising. Let's give it a watch, see how good it is. Well, here we go, I guess.
Good morning, everyone. This is the TSMU fan here, and oh my gosh, here it is. The absolute best of the best, no question. Today, we will be reviewing the absolutely amazing and outstanding Thomas movie that is The Adventure Begins, the third movie to be animated by ARC Productions and the third movie written by Andrew Brenner. Sorry that this one took a little bit longer to come out. I've just been so busy with stuff in real life, and as I mentioned before, I get sidetracked easily with other projects that I've been working on, so sorry if this one took a bit of a long time to come out. Well, there's no point in waiting around for this one anyway, so let's just jump right on in. The plot of this movie is the same as those of the first few Railway series stories published by the Reverend W. Awdry. Those stories being Edward and Gordon, The Sad Story of Henry, Edward, Gordon, and Henry, Thomas and Gordon, Thomas's Train, Thomas and the Trucks, and Thomas and the Breakdown Train. But I'll summarize the basics for those who have never seen the movie. The island of Sodor is a very busy place, and the engines are all working very hard to do their jobs right. However, problems can occur, such as Gordon getting stuck pulling a heavy goods train up Gordon's Hill. To help with the workload, Sir Topham Hatt sends for a new engine from Brighton called Thomas, a small and cheeky little E2 class tank engine. Thomas learns his way around Sodor, and Edward tells him the sad story of Henry when he backs into the shed one night, afraid of the rain. Thomas gets repainted blue to fit in with the other engines, and after a while of getting into a few scrapes, such as getting stuck behind Gordon's express train, leaving his coaches behind, and running away with the train of troublesome trucks, he learns how to be a really useful engine. One day, while working with Edward, a runaway James races through the yards. Thomas chases after him in an attempt to stop him, but is too late as James horrifically crashes off the tracks and into a field. Thomas quickly jumps into action to help by fetching Judy and Jerome, the breakdown train, and the three of them help get James back onto the tracks. After the whole ordeal, Sir Topham Hatt tells Thomas that he was a really useful engine, and for his bravery, he is awarded his own branch line and two coaches called Annie and Clarabelle. This movie is definitely, without a doubt, the best Thomas movie ever. But of course, this movie isn't perfect. So let's of course start off with the negatives of this special. I mentioned this in my previous review on Tale of the Brave, but let's start off with the elephant in the room. How Henry was handled in this movie. As everyone knows, the Brenner era made Henry this warrior sort of character, easily frightened over everything. But here's my opinion on Warrior Henry. I actually don't really mind it all that much. I know that might sound crazy to people, but I'm on the Unlucky Tug's side when he uploaded his Adventure Begins video in 2016. Of course, he has stated in his Every Thomas Movie Ranked video that his opinion on Henry in the movie has changed, but I stand by his original statement. Henry wasn't just a warrior in the CGI series. Sometimes the classic series portrayed him this way too. It wasn't all the time, because the classic series knew Henry's character in the books very well, and they were very consistent with his character, but sometimes glimpses of Warrior Henry would come through every now and then. A good example of this is the episode Henry and the Elephant from season 4. When Henry goes to the tunnel and the workmen come running out, he doesn't immediately shrug it off and just go in the tunnel. He's actually a bit scared to go in there, and his driver has to convince him to be brave and go in anyways. Of course, the warrior character isn't pushed to the extreme here like it is in the Brenner era, but overall I don't really mind Warrior Henry, as crazy as that sounds. I do think that the Brenner era does take his fear a bit too far in episodes such as Henry Spots Trouble and The Beast of Sodor. Sodor, because in those episodes he's scared mostly because in both those situations, it's sort of meant to be played off as funny, and that doesn't work. I don't mind Warrior Henry, and tying in the very first line of the sad story of Henry is very clever. Now, I totally get that Henry was not this way in the books, or even in the original episode. In the original story, it's more like Henry is vain in the way that he doesn't want his paint to get dirty and refuses to move. He's even portrayed this way in his flashback sequence in Blue Mountain Mystery, which creates a bit of a continuity error between this movie and The Adventure Begins. But like the Unlucky Tug said in his Adventure Begins review, in the context of this movie in general, the whole Warrior Henry thing works quite well, and I really like how Thomas makes him look at the rain differently, and make him see that it's nothing to be frightened of. But that's not even the biggest problem I have with The Adventure Begins. The worst problem that I see with the movie is that Henry is in his new shape for the entirety of the movie, and this is a problem that also carried over into his flashback sequence in Blue Mountain Mystery. In Blue Mountain Mystery's case, I could excuse the tiny little error because it didn't really matter in terms of the way the story goes. And in a way, you could say the same thing about The Adventure Begins, since The Adventure Begins doesn't tell the stories of Henry struggling because of his shape. But you have to keep in mind that these stories are both based off of the original books and the episodes that were made in season 1. Henry being in his old shape is a huge part of his character in the books and the series. So why not just make an old shape Henry model for this movie? It can't be that hard to make, can it? It's also worth mentioning that James is black in this movie when he first arrived on Sodor, like how he was in the Railway series, and Thomas was painted in a green livery when he first arrived instead of always being blue. These aren't necessarily issues for me though, but they are really nice little details. Anyways, another thing that I didn't really like in this movie was how Glynn was used. He's used just fine in his later Spotlight episodes such as The Christmas Coffee Pot and Over the Hill, but in this movie, Glynn doesn't really contribute that big of a role in the story. He only appears at the very end of the movie and only speaks a few lines to Thomas before it ends. I think that maybe they could have thought up some better way of incorporating Glynn into the movie, like maybe have him tell Thomas about his early days working on the branch line himself and teaching him how to look after one. Then when Thomas rescues James and he actually gets a branch line, Glynn could say something along the lines of, "I'm proud of you, little Thomas. You take good care of the branch line for me, will you?" But it's still really nice how they were able to put him in the movie as a nice little wink-wink to fans before the movie ends. Anything else wrong with this movie? No! I think that's everything. Only one problem and one small little nitpick is a huge record for these movies. So, now it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. The positives of The Adventure Begins. There are so many in this movie, it's going to be hard to list them all, but let's do it regardless. I don't even know where to start on what the best part of this movie is. All of it's great, but if I had to choose one thing that makes this such a good movie, is the music. The music in this is amazing, as the music is the old Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell themes for the characters rearranged to fit the CGI series style of music. This was such a good decision, as they didn't have to do this. The movie would have worked just fine without the original music, but the fact that they incorporated the original music into this movie, it's just amazing. Another thing that I really appreciate was how the first few Railway series stories were adapted into this movie. The stories are adapted mostly just like the TV series recreations were, but with some Railway series stuff present in them too, which I think is a pretty nice mix, and it makes the stories a lot more unique. I really like that they did this because it really showed how far the show has come from the first season to CGI animation. I also really liked how all the stories here were told in the exact order that they were in the Railway series. Edward and Gordon is first, then the sad story of Henry, then Edward, Gordon, and Henry, and then Thomas's book featuring Thomas and Gordon, Thomas's train, Thomas and the trucks, and Thomas and the breakdown train. That was a really clever decision to make, and even more clever when you consider that the characters were introduced in this movie in the same order as in the books. I really like that they did this, because if you're a fan and you're watching the movie, you'll get the reference immediately, and I love it. The other thing that I really liked was the ending. The way the movie ends with really useful engine playing in the background and that one shot of Thomas transitioning into a Railway series style illustration hits really hard. But then the movie punches you right in the gut by showing actual Railway series illustrations during the movie's credits sequence. I absolutely loved how they ended this movie. and it was definitely a great way to end a movie that celebrates a tribute to the 70th anniversary of the franchise. I also really like the beginning of the movie. The way the movie starts with this beautiful music and these beautiful panning shots of the world of Sodor is just amazing. So I can definitely say for sure that they started and ended this movie in the best possible way that they could. Another thing that I really liked about this movie is how the characters were handled. Besides Henry, all of the other characters that appear in this movie are really in character, and I like how they sort of added new aspects to their characters so that it wasn't just the classic series character traits again. I like how when Thomas arrives, he's still cheeky to Gordon, but he's also eager to work and can be a little clumsy. I also like how Thomas's introduction is the same as in the books and in the show. However, it really bothers me that they got the order of words incorrect.
The new engine had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy boiler, a short stumpy dome, and a short stumpy funnel.
Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor. He's a cheeky little engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome.
Oh well, it's just a small nitpick when the movie has so many positives. Anyways, back to talking about the characters. Edward is the old and wise one, and the one that I'd say is the closest character trait-wise to what the TV series and the Railway series portrayed him as. An old and wise engine with a lot of experience. I already covered Henry, so let's move on to Gordon. Gordon in this movie is very similar to how he was portrayed in both the classic series and in the Railway series. A very grumpy and snooty big engine who only likes pulling the express. James is mostly the same as in the books and the TV series as a stuck-up and vain sort of engine. And I really like how he follows Gordon around and tries to be just as good as he is by trying to whistle like him and agreeing with him on lots of different things, like how the coffee pot engines are old and outdated. Just like Thomas, I also like how James was introduced in this movie. Very sudden and jarring. It's surprising hearing him talk in his new voice for the first time, and then seeing him in his black paint job was such a clever choice, and I love that they did this. Annie and Clarabelle are even in this movie, and I like how they were sort of coaching Thomas on how to work on the railway, no pun intended. As I said before in the past, it seems fitting that they would try to teach Thomas the right way to do things, but I don't think that's how they should be portrayed all the time, and thankfully they weren't. I wish I could say the same for Sir Topham Hatt though. Sir Topham Hatt is mostly portrayed as the controller of the railway and an authority figure, but he's also portrayed as a little clumsy in this movie, which I thought was a bit strange. He's not really like that in the model series or in the Railway series, and they even carried that over into later Brenner era episodes. While I do think that it is funny to put the controller of the railway in a situation that he wouldn't normally be in, you shouldn't do it all the time, or else the joke will very quickly get old and become very redundant. And sadly, that's how the rest of the CGI series portrayed him. With that, that's all of the characters in the Railway series that appeared in this movie, so let's talk about the new characters in this movie. I already talked about Glynn earlier, so let's cover Judy and Jerome. Judy and Jerome are very interesting characters, but it's very strange that they have faces and are actual characters now, because in the original model series and in the Railway series, the breakdown train doesn't have a face. But I guess it makes sense to give them faces so that Thomas can interact with them. In this movie, they are mostly portrayed as ready and willing to help an engine who has had an accident, as proved when Thomas wakes them up and they immediately think that there is an emergency. They don't really do much in this movie, but I like what they did with the characters in the episode The Missing Breakdown Train. What I would have really liked to see would have been an episode where Judy and Jerome interact with Rocky. Seeing as they are both breakdown train characters, it would have been a really interesting episode. But anyways, let's move on. Another thing that I really liked is how they incorporated the classic sing-along songs into this movie. Of course, I already mentioned that they featured the song Really Useful Engine in this movie, but they also included Troublesome Trucks, the sing-along song from season 6. I really like that they did this, as it really gives off this nostalgic feeling of knowing just how old those songs are today. Of course, they changed some of the lyrics to fit the movie's theme a bit better, and of course, like I stated earlier, rearranged the songs to fit the CGI style of music. But overall, I really appreciate them putting the old sing-along songs in this movie. They even did this for a few Brenner-era episodes such as No Help at All, which features the sing-along song Down by the Docks. I should also mention that I really like the animation in this movie. Compared to King of the Railway and Tale of the Brave, The Adventure Begins looks a lot better than both of those movies combined. I really feel that ARC definitely improved a lot with this movie, and their animation would only get better and better as the series went on. But for a new fresh start, The Adventure Begins is really great animation-wise. Now, let's talk about the other elephant in the room regarding this movie. James's runaway sequence. In the books and the episode, James runs away with the heavy freight train, and Thomas is mostly a witness to James's runaway and wants to teach the troublesome trucks a lesson. But in this movie, Thomas actually chases after James and tries his best to stop him. I love this scene, from the classic reworked runaway theme to the suspense of the guard trying to couple Thomas to the brake van. This entire sequence is handled so seriously, and I love it. And then the eventual crash is just amazing. ARC literally went from at least allowable animation in King of the Railway and Tale of the Brave to this. It's amazing to see how well they've improved over the years, and I think this might just be the best crash in the entire CGI series in general. With that, I think that might just be everything good that was in this movie, so let's move on to the miscellaneous things I noticed while watching. The biggest thing that I noticed from looking on the wiki was that apparently Sodor Island fan site hinted at the fact that if this movie sold well, there would be either a follow-up or a mini special series. I honestly don't know why Mattel didn't go through with this, as it would have been a brilliant idea. I mean, lots of other fans have tried to make sequels to The Adventure Begins, and seeing as this is a lot of fans' favorite movie, I don't know why they ultimately ended up canceling it. I also noticed by looking at the wiki that there are a lot more continuity errors in this movie than just Henry being in his old shape. For example, Tidmouth Sheds in this special appears with 7 berths even though it originally had 6, and the 7th wasn't built until Calling All Engines. Kelsthorpe Road also appears at the beginning of the special even though that station wasn't built until season 8, and the wiki apparently says that when Thomas is looking out of Knapford Station, Salty can apparently be seen pulling a goods train. I don't know for sure if that engine really is Salty, as in that scene there are trucks blocking the way so you can't really see which engine it really is. But taking into account that the only engines on the railway so far are Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, and James, I don't think it's impossible that they might have used Salty just to make the yards look busy. I also noticed that there were some pretty funny moments in this movie, with the sight gag of Sir Topham Hatt's assistants rolling their eyes when he says that he's a very busy man, Judy and Jerome bickering with each other about being woken up by Thomas after he leaves them alone, and James trying to blow away the smell of his brake blocks burning also got a chuckle out of me. There was also the scene where Sir Topham Hatt says that his doctor has forbidden him to push, or pull, but that was mostly just a funny little joke in the original stories. Additionally, when Thomas is shunting Henry's coaches to the platform, he hums Really Useful Engine just like Stephen hummed the engine roll call in King of the Railway. I mentioned in that review video as a joke that that was Sodor's national anthem, so what would that make Really Useful Engine? I also noticed from looking on the wiki that this special holds the record for being the shortest Thomas film of them all, running at only 45 minutes total. Maybe there could have been a way that they could have made this special longer, like actually going in detail for the sad story of Henry and Edward, Gordon, and Henry, which the latter is only mentioned in this special by Edward. But I do understand that if you were to include these things, the special might run for too long, and you don't just want to add filler just for the sake of making a movie longer. So I appreciate the writers for showing some restraint and not making the special too long to sit through. I also heard someone mention that in this special, Thomas wears a livery that the real E2 tank engines wore at some point. However, there never was an E2 that was numbered 70, and that Thomas being numbered 70 was a reference to the 70th anniversary of the franchise. That's honestly just a really nice detail, and I really like how they made Thomas's old livery an actual livery that the E2 class engines wore. I also like how they tied in the anniversary into this movie, sort of like how Misty Island Rescue did, which in that movie's case, the Joby and Joby would being the Japanese word for birthday. But I already mentioned that in my Misty Island Rescue review, so let's move on from that. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that in this special, Thomas, James, and Sir Topham Hatt are voiced by different actors than they were in previous episodes and specials. These new actors definitely do a good job with their voices, and surprisingly, Sir Topham Hatt in the US dub now is voiced by his UK voice actor, who I feel does a better job at portraying the character in general. Another thing that I noticed was, well, like my Tale of the Brave review, the wiki doesn't really list any other interesting facts than what I've already pointed out, and I can't really think of any other interesting things that I noticed while watching this movie, so I think I'll end the video here. This special is such an improvement over everything else that came before, and it really felt like they tried to make a brilliant movie that would outshine the competition, and they certainly did that. The Adventure Begins is the best Thomas movie, and there's no other movie out there that can compare to it. Well, maybe except one. But that's for another video. The Adventure Begins is a great Thomas movie, and it's definitely a great movie to watch if you're not a Thomas fan and want to know what the series is about. I can assure you, it's a movie that's worth checking out. Well, that's the end of this video, and I'll see you all in my review on Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, which is the next movie. Thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more review videos like this one. This is the TSMU fan signing out. Special thanks to my Patreon supporter, Red and Blue Panier 45, and I give an extra special thanks to a patron of mine who has chosen to remain anonymous. If you'd like to learn how to get your name at the end of every new video that I upload, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I've linked it on my YouTube channel's banner.